Hello, I'm Kirsty Young, and this is a podcast from the Desert Island Discs archive. For rights reasons, we've had to shorten the music. The programme was originally broadcast in 2008. My castaway this week is Sanjeev Bhaskar. As a writer and performer, he's become a star by making us laugh and bringing the British Asian experience to big audiences with shows like Goodness Gracious Me and The Kumars at number 42. He was a late starter in the fame game, aged 30, unemployed, mired in debt and depression and living at home with his parents. The idea of Emmy Awards, a number one hit record and the honour of an OBE must surely have seemed an impossibility. But in just 15 years he's bagged them all. And then some. Yet very recently he said, "I had great difficulty in realising I was successful. I had never seen myself as successful. Everything was about falling short, about not achieving, about unrealised potential." You've also said, Sanjeev, that your initial success ultimately was founded on the toss of a coin. What happened?
Yes, it was. During a period of time where I was out of work and living at my parents' and being very depressed, I got together with a friend of mine, Nitin Sawhney, who's a composer who I'd been at university with. We'd sort of done a double-act thing at university, and we thought, well, let's resurrect that. We had time on our hands. And we were called the Secret Asians, which was, a pun, and the comedy didn't really get a lot better than that. From what I can remember, the show was called Papa Dom Preach.
Right, I'm with you.
The flyers for the show had gone out, and a couple of producers from the BBC had seen it. And apparently they said, well, look, this will probably be rubbish, but let's toss a coin and see whether we go straight to the pub or go there and then to the pub. And fortunately for us, the coin landed right. They came to see the show and came backstage and said, this is the kind of material we're looking for a new sketch show.
Does it seem to you that you've packed an enormous amount into 15 years between being 30 and apparently having not much to look forward to, and being 45 and having everything you have now?
Yeah, at times it's felt like living someone else's life. But I'm not going to give it back to whoever owns it legitimately.
That's very interesting that you say it's like living someone else's life, because I've been thinking about this and wondering that actually if it was almost the other way around, if when you were having this life of drudgery, if that felt like living somebody else's life, if you felt that you should be the successful person, but no, not that way around.
No, I mean, in a way, it may feel like a very strange dichotomy, but even when I was quite young, I thought that I was destined to achieve something. And I suppose the most depressing aspect of that period of my life was that I just thought that the most that I could ever achieve would be mediocrity.
Was that where the depression came from then?
I think a lot of it was to do with that, yeah. I just thought, the best that I can ever end up as is a statistic, as a number of people unemployed, or the number of people who work in blue-collar jobs or whatever. And that was depressing.
But it's a story with, I was going to say a happy ending, you're not even close to the end yet, but a happy outcome for now. Bhaskar, you were brought up in Hounslow, in Middlesex. What was home like?
It was a little bit of India that was existing in West London. Within the house, my parents, my father came to Britain in 1957. My mum came here in 1960, I think.
And is it true your father had just £3 and a little scrap of paper with an address on it when he arrived?
I think it was even less than £3, actually. Yeah, he came with literally nothing, and the immigrant story, I think, is an extraordinary one for those people who did come here with nothing to actually have built up to anything, let alone having achieved status and become part of the fabric of this country. I think is an incredible achievement, and I think that I'm never going to achieve anything greater than what my father did. And
the home for you was above you. Your dad owned, was it 2 laundrettes?
Yes.
He built up a business. As well as working, he worked in the local Nestle factory.
That's
as well.
Right, yeah.
So he was a hard-working man. Sounds like sort of 25 hours a day.
Workaholic, yeah. I mean, that was beyond a kind of work ethic. I mean, one of the things that I only found out probably in the last 5 or 6 years was that my father's big dream when he came to Britain was to be a film director. And I remember as a child finding various... I found a prospectus for Pinewood Studios and another one, I think, for Twickenham Studios. And as a kid, I was just fascinated by these. I just, it was all back projection and huge lights and all that kind of thing. And I never really questioned where they'd come from. But that's what my dad really wanted to do, and I think that all obviously ended as soon as duty called.
You said only 5 or 6 years ago. How did you find out that had been what he'd wanted to do?
I think he finally relented and told me. I then asked why he hadn't told me, all those years before. And I think what I garnered from the conversation was that the crushing nature of having to give up all your dreams or your biggest dreams, he didn't want his children to go through the same thing. It gave me an idea of how desperately he'd wanted to do it.
I know how close you are to your parents. We'll maybe talk about that a little later, but was that the key to understanding your father a bit better when you understood that about him, that he'd given up something that was dear to him?
It certainly helped, yeah. And I think actually becoming a parent myself, I think probably opened a greater window on that, because suddenly, wanting to protect your children almost at any cost.
Tell me about your next. Read in an interview you once gave, you said, "The worst day of my life was when I was 7 years old and I discovered there was such a thing as racism." What happened?
This may have been something to do with Kiss Chase.
Yeah.
Which is a shame. It hasn't become an Olympic sport. Maybe by 2012 it could. But when I was at school, Kiss Chase, you ran after a girl, and once you caught them, you kissed them. And I was allowed to run after them and catch them, but I wasn't allowed to kiss them. And I couldn't understand why. I just thought, well, there are guys over there who certainly smell worse than I do, and they're allowed to join in. And then it dawned on me. It dawned on me that this was about colour, and I joined in anyway. I joined in with the running and the catching. As a kid, you're desperate to be part of something bigger, part of a group or a club or a niche in some way. But that was the first inkling of kind of, oh, wait a minute, I am different. And
how does that make you feel when you're 7?
Utterly confused, but the desperation to join in overpowered any sentiment of being an outsider in some way. And then I started to see the world slightly differently. I suddenly then, the way that my parents were talked to in public by people, not insulting, but patronisingly, that suddenly became more and more clear. And then the kind of the funny looks and the giggles and all that kind of stuff, they took on a completely different hue.
And did you witness much of the cultural friction? I mean, did you see a National Front march? Were you aware of bricks through the window?
No. Well, I became aware. This was slightly older than 7, but of NF being painted on our front door and things like that. And the secondary school I went to was on the borders with Southall, and there was a major National Front march through Southall around 1979, 1980. And it was very, very frightening.
Then about student life. You started performing and acting and writing when you were a student.
I didn't do anything at school at all. And when I got to university to do a marketing degree, I did drama, free choice drama, so it was weekends and evenings. I just thought, well, if I can't be any good here, then there's absolutely no point in me trying to pursue it. Then I'd just kind of kill that off and focus on marketing.
Is it true that your father used to whisper in your ear, "I want to be a businessman"?
Yeah, but I mean, for me, that's the earliest indication of subliminal marketing. Except I said I want to be an actor, which my dad then said, we pronounce it doctor. Which is the only thing that they do.
When did you say, "I want to be an actor"?
According to my mum, when I was about 3. Rather frighteningly, my son's indicated something very similar, and he's nearly at that age. So yeah, I'm going to have to work on the subliminal marketing a little harder.
And you mentioned a while ago Nitin Sawhney, who is a very well-known composer now. But
genius.
At the time, the two of you became firm friends, and he was writing with you.
We just figured that there was nobody out there that reflected our experience of being both British and Asian. And I think coming through a period of time where you'd had programmes like Mind Your Language or Love Thy Neighbour or Till Death Us Do Part, where the being foreign was the gag. In something like Till Death Us Do Part, it wasn't. But to all intents and purposes, if you were a minority, what you got called the day after the show was on were the names. Nobody kind of deconstructing what Alf Garnett was like and his ridiculous bigoted position. You got called the names.
Had you ever wished in those growing up years that you didn't have to be Asian?
Yes, I did, yeah. I was kind of embarrassed about being Asian. I remember kind of trying to toy with the idea. Somebody kind of said to me at the swimming pool once, and I must have been about 9 or 10, and they said, "What's your name?" And I went, "Stephen?" And it was just so utterly lacking in confidence. If I'd gone, it's Steve, they would have gone, oh, Steve, do you want to come and play that? But it was there was a question mark at the end of it as well. It was called Stephen, or maybe Samuel or something. So yeah, I'm very much embarrassed about the fact that, my mother didn't wear skirts, or that we had food that was very different. We didn't have boiled food at home. What a godsend that was when I look back on it now. But it took me some time to appreciate that I had this kind of fabulous wealth of experience.
That's sort of what I'm getting to here, because I'm thinking about you having the nerve to get up on stage and talk about the funny things in your life, much of which was the Asian experience and your very Asian parents. That's quite a journey from the 9-year-old who's pretending he's having fish fingers and peas. It
is, and I think part of that, what helps is finding other people, people that share that experience. I mean, one of the things, certainly with Goodness Gracious Me, that bonded us all immediately was this kind of outpouring of shared experiences. It was very tentative. I remember the first couple of meetings, someone would say, does your mum keep a suitcase on top of the wardrobe? And someone would say, are your remote controls still covered in cling film? And they'd be, oh my God, thank God for that. Yes, they do. And so, what was in the suitcase, I'm wondering? It was clothes. And it was part of that mentality of, we don't know when we're going to have to move. And when the National Front were in power, there were times when you thought, well, I really don't know which way this is going to go. I don't know where the mood of the nation is going. You had the suitcase on top of the wardrobe. You grabbed that and you ran. So, Sanjeev Bhaskar, we come to the desolate years. I'm going to force you to talk about moving back home and all of the debt. How much debt were you in? I think it was about £15,000, which probably doesn't sound a lot now. But sounds like quite a lot. How come you're in 15? Well, again, looking back on it, a really interesting period, but quite bleak. I got a series of marketing jobs, and the last marketing job I had to sue them. I took them to court, sued them for breach of contract. They weren't paying me. They weren't paying me expenses, and I was kind of using my credit card to kind of keep the company going. And during that 2 years, I couldn't get any kind of job at all because my references were tied up with the court case. And so you had to move back home? So I had to move back in with my parents, which at the age of 28, particularly judging, from what my peers were doing at the time, was particularly difficult. The one thing that I'm grateful for was the fact that culturally it wasn't seen by them as any kind of failure. So yeah, for about 6 months, no, for about 3 months, I was really depressed. What form did that take? I mean, I would get up late. I'd have a fried egg on toast, and then I would go to the video shop, get 3 videos, 60p each, come back, watch them back to back. My mum and dad would be back from work at that time. I'd have a cup of tea with them, and I'd then go to my room for the rest of the evening, come down, have dinner, go back to my room. That was it. About 3 months. And were you doing any writing yet? None at all, no. You seem very energetic and self-possessed. That was not present at all, was it? You were just... It wasn't, but also I wouldn't have had a notion of where to direct it. I went down and picked up the dole money and came back. And that was kind of it. That was about as energetic as I could be. And did you think, this will be my life? That was the bleakest aspect of it. Because at that point, I thought, I've got no conviction that I'm going to win this case. I may lose it. And I will work in a factory somewhere and will be paying back a debt for the rest of my life. And I was 30 at that point, and I thought, that's it. That's what it's going to be. Sanjeev Bhaskar, we've talked, much earlier, we talked about this flip of the coin for the BBC producers who came to see you as you were doing these sort of exploratory stand-up routines that you did and sketch, and you did a bit of singing in there, and there was a lot in it. It was a heady mix and quite an unusual mix that you were offering. But in that, they saw a performer that could be part of a show that was to become Goodness Gracious Me. You were part of the team, and that quickly became a success. Yeah, it was strange, because it was... the first reaction we got, generally, was Asian sketch show. Are Asians funny? I've known them to be funny. And I had to kind of, retrospectively, I had to say, we've always been funny. We just didn't feel the need to let you know about it. Right. So do you think, what do they call them? BBC bigwigs, I think. Do you think they were resistant to the idea? I think they were, yeah. But I had the same thing when it came to the Kumars as well. I mean, it was rejected for about 4 or 5 years before anyone took it up, and that was just a bunch of people saying I don't get it. But I'm grateful that they at least gave us the opportunity to try. But yeah, I think we had to go through more than any other people did.
It's understandably a very tricky and sensitive subject, this, but there will also be those people who say, oh, it's just the BBC ticking a diversity box. There we go. We'll give those people with brown skin a sort of half an hour on the telly, and that'll keep them quiet and it'll keep the governors happy.
Yeah. Well, as long as I'm getting a job, I don't care. Yeah, they do say that. I mean, certainly with the stuff that I've done, the criticism is without basis. Simply, if you look at the audience figures, and I mean, there are probably 1.5 million Asians in this country. And
you were getting figures 3.5 million.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So even if every single one of them was watching, we had more of an indigenous population than the British Asians being kind of particularly loyal.
But it wasn't. I mean, goodness gracious me, certainly wasn't in the first couple of series. It wasn't political. Did you see it as having a sort of undertow of importance in terms of its cultural significance, or did you, as you say, were you just interested in the laughs and the paycheck?
Not in that order, obviously. we knew that we were going to be politicised, and that would happen whether we did it or not. And so we thought, well, let us not do it. Let's concentrate on it being funny. And I think the fact that you had British Asians on screen who were reflecting a confidence within the wider community, I think that was a far stronger political message than us doing overtly political subjects.
Let's talk for a moment about the nature of fame and celebrity, because of course you're married to Meera Syal. Together you are this huge golden power couple in the entertainment industry. How do you deal with that?
By letting her be, the important one, because she is more talented than I am, and I have to say that for legal reasons. No, we've always said that we're rubbish celebrities. We're not particularly good celebrities. We don't really do the party thing. We don't really do the premieres thing. We don't really do the spreads in the lifestyle magazines and all that kind of stuff. There's a certain responsibility, I think, that comes with being in the public eye, and I do feel happily a sense of duty towards that, because it's also, allowed me the life I lead.
And so now you are a father of a young son who's almost 3, and also stepfather to a teenager. A while back we were talking about the fact that at 30, living at home, depressed, no money, no career, 12 years later, not just money and a career, but a wonderful wife who you love and these children who you take care of. Are you able to connect with the reality of that, or sometimes do you feel as though it's all happened rather quickly?
Well, I think that for the first, for at least half the career so far, I don't think I dealt with it particularly well at all. I just couldn't connect with this person who lived this lifestyle or met these people. I remember the first time I was on Parkinson. I was living in this dingy one-bed flat in Islington, which had no natural light. I remember this lovely car picked me up, and I was on a show and I met other famous people, and I got in this lovely car and I got dropped back to this flat with no natural light, and I thought, who the hell am I? Am I the guy who lives here? Am I the guy who does, shows like Parkinson? So I found that really hard. And how did you begin to accept it and make peace with it? And even, of course, the most important bit, enjoy it, for God's sake. I think that, again, your friends and your family are key in those kind of... Relationships are key. We're on this planet to connect with other people. We're not here to kind of live in bubbles, And through that, a little bit of therapy, a little bit of counselling. But I think after certainly getting together with Meera, and I think getting married and becoming a parent, certainly, the one great thing about becoming a parent, of the many, many great things, is that you are forced to live in the present. And it's the one thing that we're not socially taught to do. We read history, we look backwards, we have ambitions, so we project forwards, and we forget about the present all the time. And I think that once you have a kid, then they live in the present. They're not saying, listen, I might have a poo in about 3 weeks and I suggest you get some nappies in. It's coming. It's here. It's now. Move quickly. So speaks a man in the middle of potty training. Oh, I'll tell you. Your son, not you, I hasten. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for clarifying that. I'm not. There are times when I'm not sure. Let's talk then not about your response to your fame, but your parents' response. I imagine incredibly proud. They're just jumping on a bandwagon. Let's face it. What do you mean? I don't think they've understood anything I've ever done, and they've done that thing that everybody else is laughing. He's hilarious, No, they are proud, and I think that's, if there's one thing that I'm relieved and grateful for, is the fact that while they're still around, they've seen me go from the dim dark days of my early 30s to the point that they can be proud of me. And, the fact that I'm, married and got a family and all the things that they would have wanted to see, I've just about managed to achieve, while they're still around.
You got them on the telly, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
What did you do?
I did an advert for some chocolates, and I thought it just would be good. I know my dad, he always flirted with the idea of the media, and I thought, well, let's just get them in. It was a 2-day shoot, and they turned up on the first day, early, obviously, and somebody came up to them and said, oh, hello, you are... And my mum said, we are Sanjeev's parents. And this guy said, that's very good, but you're playing Sanjeev's parents. And they said, and my dad said, no, we are Sanjeev's parents. And this guy said, that's very good, method acting. I like it. So that was great. I think making your parents proud, there shouldn't be any embarrassment about that. It's a nice thing to do.
What about on the desert island then? Because you're about to go there, one more record and then you're off.
Oh my goodness.
On your own, no wife, no potty training toddler, no teenager to annoy you. How are you going to deal with it all?
Well, it's I've been isolated before, so I know I can survive it. So that side of it doesn't bother me. But also, I do know that change is inevitable. So no one can tell me that I'm going to be marooned there forever. Something may change. I'll probably cry a lot.